guarantee you they're a faithful congregation for sure. And Jimmy serves one of the elders there as well. He's got 3 young'uns. Him and Pam have 3 children and 7 grandchildren. So we're just delighted to have him here. He's here not because of all that, that's good and all, but he's here because he's a faithful gospel preacher, and so thankful that finally, after all these years, we've been trying to get him come up here. We had about a date set, and then we ran into COVID mess and all that. But he's now with us. We're so thankful for that. And so he's going to be teaching this Bible class hour, and then each night after this morning, of course, and we'll be eating together. Don't forget about that. He'll be here every night at 7 o'clock. 7 o'clock. So at this time, no further speaking from me. We'll listen to Jimmy.
I'm glad the static was with Freddie, not with me all of a sudden. I am very grateful to be here and the opportunity that is afforded me. I take it with no small amount of emphasis that this is minor, this is major. I have had this calendar date in my desk drawer for I don't know how long. And of course, when COVID hit, everything turned upside down, as Freddie was mentioning. But it's good to see you and good to be here with you during this course of this meeting. If you'll take your Bible and turn to the book of Job, I want to study with you some practical things that have to do with the nature of human suffering. There's probably not a person in here, maybe even right now, you're suffering some kind of physical ailment. Matter of fact, how many of you wake up with Arthur every day? You're looking at one. And so the nature of pain and the questions that go with that. And sometimes the questions, as Job asked him in chapter 3, the why questions. The Bible word is wherefore. Why did I not die as soon as I was born out of the womb? Why am I suffering? Why did you bring me into this world if this is the case? Matter of fact, in chapter 3, Job makes this statement in verse 17. There, talking about death. There the wicked cease from troubling, and there the weary be at rest. Evidently, Job realized that when this life is over, there's some kind of blessing on the other side. It's not just the ceasing of existing. It carries with the idea that you actually have your rest. We come to the New Testament, obviously in Revelation 14:13, blessed are the dead that die in the Lord. I have no doubt that if Job died, he would have been where those who die in the Lord would be. Because God says he's a perfect and an upright man, one that fears God and shuns evil. It says, blessed are the dead that die in the Lord, and henceforth, yea, says the Spirit, they do rest from their labors, their works do follow them. Job's works still follow him. And we have an entire book, 42 chapters, in the Old Testament of one of the great examples of endurance. The Bible uses the word patience in James chapter 5, but the word there literally means to abide up under, endurance. How many of you have just had to keep on keeping on? You hurt, you struggle. By the way, if you just get old, you're going to learn endurance. There was a gentleman yesterday, I was at a special day that the Cedar Grove Church of Christ where Brother Paul Sane preaches. And he had 4 speakers yesterday morning. A gentleman was sitting next to me who was going through a real tough time. And he just says, you just learn to deal with it. This is the new normal. How many of you ever heard that one? This is just the new normal. Well, we know at the end of the book of Job, all of these heartaches and all of this suffering and so forth, it went away. But let me make this observation. Job was a good man at the beginning of this book. God's not trying to take a wicked man and convert him to be a good man. Job was a good man at the beginning of this book, so good people do suffer. And God permits that in this life. Now the question is, why am I going through this? If you never asked that question, you didn't live long enough. Because somewhere in your life, if not in the past or now in the present, probably in whatever future you and I have, we're going to struggle. Okay? And physical ailments and spiritual and literally emotional things, because by the way, you can't read the book of Job without getting emotional in the first 2 chapters. I remember a friend of mine who was the only surviving member of an automobile accident. And it was in Huntsville, Alabama, the funeral. Her husband and all her children were killed in the automobile accident. She's the only one who survived it. And I remember seeing all the coffins lined up end to end in front of that church building. And then literally her dad and her mom, literally her dad, because she was still physically in pain because of the automobile accident, literally had to almost carry her down the aisle to get her to sit on the front pew while here's the funeral for her husband and all of her children. I went to school with this girl at Freed Hardeman. And I was thinking, as I was looking at those coffins, I thought, is this what Job looked like? Is this what the funeral service of the 10 kids of Job that died all of a sudden in one moment, is this what Job was facing? Now, how is she going to survive that? By the way, not only did she survive it, she thrived. Isn't it important when you go through trials in life that when lemon comes, you make lemonade out of it? That literally you rise above whatever obstacle is put in your way. The book of Job is quite an interesting book. Matter of fact, while it's what we call in the wisdom literature, some folks might think that this is just a fairy tale. This is a Jewish story. Well, let me tell you something. There's a prophet in the Old Testament and an inspired writer in the New Testament that quotes the fact that this man existed. Ezekiel 14 and James chapter 5. If this is a fairy tale, Ezekiel didn't know it and James didn't know it, because they literally quote the existence of Job. So this man literally lived just like you're living right here in Sequatchie Valley. He's much as alive many, many years ago, by the way, way beyond the Mosaical law. He lived during patriarchal law, according to chapter 1. He's the head of his family. He's the one offering sacrifices for his children. And so the picture is, what do we learn from such an ancient story or account of a man that Ezekiel says, were it but Noah, Daniel, and Job, they would be the only ones, according to their own following of the righteous way of God, they would be the only ones to deliver their souls. And then James talks about, you have heard of the patience, the endurance of Job. Okay? Now, the first 3 verses of the first chapter are, to me, not just biographical sketch of, introducing Job. While that's true, I believe it's a priority list. How many of you have ever known of people that they lose a lot of things and all of a sudden they lose their faith? Literally, they quit, just literally give up. Like, I didn't bargain for this. I thought if I'm God's child, God the Father takes care of his children. You do believe God takes care of his children, right? By the way, does God take care of his own son that died on a cross? Absolutely. When Jesus said, Father, into thy hands I commit my spirit, did the Father take his spirit? The Bible says in Ecclesiastes chapter 12, the body returns to the dust, the soul returns to God that gave it, correct? Is that true of Jesus' soul? By the way, went into the Hadean realm, I know, and then God later on raises him from the dead. He's at the right hand of God right now. While we're still in the land of the living, he's in the land that we're hoping to go to. By the way, did Job want to go to heaven? Did Job live his life that way? In chapter 1 it says there's a man in the land of Uz. His name was Job. The man was perfect and upright, one that feared God and shunned evil. By the way, there's not one statement in there about his family or one statement there about what he owns. How many of you have ever read anybody's obituary column? Okay, it talks about married to so many kids, so many grandkids, survived by, retired from, okay, or, worked for, okay, manufacturer of this and this and this, inventor of this and this and this. Okay, verse 2, born unto him 7 sons, 3 daughters. Now you get to his family. Okay, by the way, is your family important? Yes, but verse 1 is more important than verse 2. Always remember that. Then you come to verse 3. His substance was 7,000 sheep, 3,000 camels, 500 yoke of oxen, 500 she-asses. Very great household. In other words, he had servants that worked in his household. And so that this man was the greatest man of all the East. Notice, of the East. It is my conviction that the setting of the chronology of Job fits at the end of the book of Genesis for this reason. One of Job's 3 friends, his name is Eliphaz. Eliphaz is a Temanite. Teman is a descendant of Esau. Okay, get the picture here. which means there is a generation beyond Esau that this man Eliphaz, who's a Temanite of the line of Esau, this individual, okay, is contemporary with Job. Okay, it's my conviction, according to that information, that while you're looking at Joseph and Jacob and the other sons of Jacob in Egypt, Joseph and Jacob are the greatest men of the West. While at the same time this is going on in the West, this is the greatest man in the East. Now, I'll assure you today that there are two things going on this day at the same time at two different places. There's a worship service going to take place here today, correct? There's an exact same worship service that's going to take place from 9:30 to 10:30 and then 10:30 to 11:30 back home where I normally preach. These are contemporary. They're going on at the exact same time. I believe that's what happened here in the book of Job. All of what you study in the book of Job is going on in the East, while all of this other that you find in the book of Genesis is going on in the West. So Job's not the greatest man of his day at that time. He's the greatest man of the East. Get the picture? I believe Job would be parallel to the greatness of Jacob. But one thing we know about Job is the Messianic bloodline does not come through Job. The Messianic bloodline comes through Jacob, through Judah, David, all the way down the line. That's why Genesis has that account in there. But that doesn't mean that Jacob is the only great man on the planet. This man is a great man. Jacob lives under the patriarchal age, does he not? Job lives under the patriarchal age. So these are two things going on at the same time. By the way, Jacob's got a big family, correct? Job's got a big family, correct? Would you say of Jacob, he's a perfect man and upright, one that fears God and shuns evil? Would you say that of Joseph? I would say that. By the way, can that be said of you and me? Surely it should. By the way, the word perfect here does not mean sinless. It is the Hebrew word tov, and the word tov literally means one who is single-minded with one God. That's as simple as I know how to explain it. Job never followed idolatry. Never, not a single time. By the way, idolatry would be all around him. Okay? By the way, did the Edomites follow idolatry? Yes. But Job is a man that feared only one God. By the way, would it be said of Abraham that he was perfect? By the way, what's Abraham's daddy doing? Okay, what's Abraham's family doing? By the way, is Laban not upset that Rachel has stole his gods? Abraham never followed but one God. He was a perfect man. By the way, can that be said of you? You only have one God, and you're only going to have one God all the way to the day you die and beyond. That's what the word perfect in Hebrew meant. It didn't mean sinless. Okay? Upright. What is upright? It means he's righteous. That means he does what this single God tells him to do, and that's how he treats his fellow man. By the way, if you read the book of Job, he is highly, highly respected in his town. He sits in the gate of the city. As a matter of fact, everybody stood up, as it were, when Job came in to the gate. By the way, when he's suffering, they all make fun of him. You ever known of anybody that all of a sudden hears someone that's trying to live a righteous life and then some calamity happens to him and said, "Where's your God? Where's your God?" As a matter of fact, Job's three friends basically told him, "You must have done something so awful. No one has ever suffered this much and been righteous. Nobody." Let me ask you a question. Did Jesus suffer on a cross? Did Jesus suffer at a scourging before he ever got on that cross? Will you ever find a more righteous man than that? You know, Eliphaz, Bildad, and Zophar would have said that to Jesus, right? At the foot of the cross, watching it. Nobody's ever suffered like that. You must have done something wrong. No, it's not that I've done anything wrong. It's you've done something wrong, and that's why I'm up here. That's why I'm suffering. Okay? What are we looking at here? You can take away all of Job's substance in verse 3. You can take away all 10 children of Job in verse 2. And Job is still going to survive. You know why? Because verse 1 was not taken away from him. I've seen family lose children to cancer, to accidents, motorcycle, car. I've seen them mourn, weep, wail, and howl. As a matter of fact, we have a family right now who's still struggling with the death of one of their children from a motorcycle accident. They've been coming back to services. They don't want to talk to anybody. They don't want to ask anybody. They don't want anybody to ask them, how are you doing? Let me make this statement. If someone has just had a death, please don't walk up to them and ask them how they're doing. They're not doing good. I know you're trying to find something to say to try to, at least make a connection with them. Don't ask them that question. If you walk up to Job, Job, how are you doing? How do you think he's doing? I remember when my dad died and you had funeral home visitations. Y'all still have funeral home visitations? And I remember the line was out the door of the funeral home. Matter of fact, you're supposed to shut off at like 9. It was like 10 o'clock when we got out of the funeral home. I had so many people come. And I remember all the people coming by me to talk to me about my dad's death. How many of y'all have ever been in a funeral home visitation line when it's your family member that's dead? I got all kind of conflicting information from people. I know they're trying, I know they meant well, but I heard things like, time will heal this. And then I had the person right behind them almost says, you'll never get over it. By the way, with friends like that, at a time like that, who needs any enemies, right? By the way, welcome to Eliphaz, Bildad, and Zophar in a funeral home line. Welcome. Because he's dealing with the exact same problem. By the way, sometimes in humanity, don't we try to find the words at an opportune moment, as apples of gold and pictures of silver, so is the word fitly spoken? The idea is, well, I need to say something. I'm looking at you. Let me tell you something. Sometimes the best words to say is, I'm sorry, I'm praying for you. That's it. Don't try to come up with an explanation as to why such and such happened. By the way, you'd have to be God to know that. And even Job wanted to talk to God and not talk to his friends about his problems. Why? Because he knew God's the only one that knew. He literally knew God's the only one that knew. But you can take away all my substance, and you can take away all my children. You didn't take my God from me. And I'm here to tell you, if you don't learn anything in this lesson or in anything I preach down here this week, if you've got God as the closest person in your being, through thick or through thin, you're going to make it. Now, the flip side of that coin is, if you don't have God, and there are a lot of folks in our world that don't, you know that? If you don't have God, or you got a big family, they're healthy, they're thriving, they're successful, you got more money than you'll ever spend, you got more real estate, you got more stocks and bonds, you've cornered the market on the go, whatever. If you don't have God, you let a calamity come and you'll find out who your God is. You'll find out. So what are we looking at here? All of a sudden the scene shifts from Job and the biographical information and Job's children having their birthdays and they're all having a party, and then Job offering sacrifices for his kids lest they've, spoken evil against God, spoke vanity against God so that they can be forgiven. Scene shifts to heaven. Here's the sons of God appear before the throne of God. By the way, all of a sudden Satan comes on the scene, right? How old is this gentleman? Satan. I call him a gentleman. You and I know he's an adversary, our enemy, the real enemy. By the way, it's not ISIS or Al-Qaeda that's our enemy. It's Satan who's our enemy. Have you considered my servant Job? There's none like him in the earth, perfect and upright man, one that fears God and shuns evil. Let me ask you a question. If God says that about you, is it true or false? I've had people call me a false teacher. I've had people who tried to get me fired at Bethel, claiming I'm a false teacher. By the way, obviously the elders didn't think so, right? Because I'm still there, been there for a little while. Sometimes you have to just let it go in one ear and out the other when people say who you are and what you are. Y'all know that? I would say this to these young people on this social media stuff you're looking at, which, by the way, in a lot of ways you're living on it. I can't imagine seeing my grandkids with an electronic medium in their hand. They literally would go insane. How about your grandkids? It's called unplugging. Listen, someone on Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, I don't care what your social media platform is. By the way, Facebook, I guess, is grandparents now, right? Okay, that's not what the young people are on. Okay, if they call you lower than a snake's belly in a wagon's rut, I mean, you're the lowest thing on this planet, just listen, consider the source. Okay, now if God called you that, that's a different matter. You take that to heart. All of a sudden, God uses Job out of all people on this planet that are serving God. God singles Job out to talk to Satan. By the way, he's not converting Satan, right? 100% chance of not converting that individual, correct? The devil, hell is prepared for who? The devil and his angel. He is never going to be converted. But God is making Job an illustration of what my people down there on this planet are all about. And here's Satan's argument in verse 9. Does Job fear God for nothing? You put a hedge about it. You take everything away that you have given him, he'll curse you to your face. By the way, we know at the end of chapter 1 that did not happen. As a matter of fact, it was the very opposite. Naked came out of my mother's womb, naked shall I return thither. The Lord gives, the Lord takes away. Blessed. He didn't curse. Blessed be the name of the Lord. But why would Satan use such an argument as that? Satan knows human nature. Correct? Satan knows human nature. Are there people that follow Jesus Christ around simply because of the good that he could do for them? Feed their belly. Heal their sick. The reason they follow you is because of what you give them. You take that away and don't do it, they'll leave you. Read John 6. By the way, he feeds their belly with the loaves and fish, right? Then he departs for a while. When he comes back, they want to know where he is. You seek me not because you saw the miracles, but because you did eat of the loaves and are filled. Labor not for the meat that perishes, but for that which is under eternal life. And then he begins to talk about the bread of life. By the way, he doesn't feed them any fellowship meal. He's going to give them all of a sudden a crash course, okay, on a one-day gospel meeting. By the time you come to verse 66 of John 6, it says, from that time, many of his disciples walked no more with him. By the way, does he still have healing powers? Does he still have the ability to fill your belly? Why did they quit? Because they're not interested in what he's got to say. They're interested in what he can do for them. Let me ask you a question. You're right here on a highway, right? Is it 41? 47? So I'll butcher it all week. I'll call it 147 by the end of the week. Okay, anyway, we live right at church buildings right off Highway 72. Okay, spring and fall of every year. By the way, not so much since COVID. Okay, spring and fall about everywhere, you have what I call transients. You know what a transient is? Walk in. Okay, all of a sudden they drive up in their automobile, the man sits in the car and the woman gets out. And I'm at the building. Are you the pastor here? Well, I used to say, I'm the preacher here. Well, now that I am one of the elders, I still say I'm the preacher here. And then all of a sudden I get a cock and bull story that would fill up a Hollywood movie script. I'm literally telling you, I could write a book on what I've been told is the misery of people who've come wanting something from the church. By the way, I just want to cut through the fat. What do you want? Stop. What do you want? What are you after? Well, I've almost run out of gas. My check comes in at the end of the month. You know, it's in the middle of the month now. It'll come in at the end of the month. I promise you, I'll send the check to the church. Stop. Just stop. Okay? I haven't eaten. My kids, by the way, if you bring a carload full of kids that are pig filthy in diapers, I'll empty the pantry of a church building in the back of the trunk of your car. I mean, I'm a soft heart for kids that suffer. Okay, but listen, folks, you know how easy it is to get jaded? When you hear some of this stuff, there was an individual who was leaving from Florida headed to Texas, coming by way of North Alabama. I said, you know, you could have got on I-10 and got to Texas a lot quicker. Well, yeah, but I was up in your neck of the woods. I'm not exaggerating, folks. That's a true fact of what I was told. By the way, if you give it to them, are they going to stay for your services if it was Wednesday night? The deacon in charge of benevolence at home, basically, I turn these operations over to him. He says, if you'll come on like a Sunday or a Wednesday, if you're in our area, we have Bible class starts at 7 o'clock. After Bible class is over, we'll really sit down and deal with whatever situation that you're looking at. By the way, it generally culls every case that there is. You do know that, right? I am not interested in your Bible class. I am interested in your gas, your food, a place to stay, turn my lights back on. Do you and I know humanity? Do you think Satan don't know? How long has Satan been observing humanity? Here's why these people serve this God. Look at what God gives them. I guarantee you, if those things were taken away, those people would turn on him. They'd say, you don't love me. If you love me, you'd keep giving me what I'm asking for. Oh, wait, God loved his son? God let his son go hungry 40 days and 40 nights, and all of a sudden, what are you dealing with? You brought this person into my life. I just obeyed the God. I just was baptized. And immediately, guess who shows up? Y'all ever seen that in a new convert? Guess who shows up? Let me tell you something. Satan will keep you from obeying the gospel. Do you know that? He'll do every trick in the book. By the way, he don't play by the rules. He'll try every trick in the book to keep you from obeying the gospel. I'll tell you at point number 2. As soon as you obey the gospel, he's not through with you. He's not through with you at all. As a matter of fact, while you're on fire and zeal and enthusiasm because now you're a child of God, he'll try to break you. Look, I've been a Christian over 50 years. I'm a veteran in this war. You know, we celebrate Veterans Day, right? Let me tell you something. I never fought in the military, but I am a veteran of the biggest war that's been going on this planet since the Garden of Eden. I know who my enemy is. I know his tactics. Don't you? He wants your soul. Let me tell you something. Does Satan have the world out here? Isn't he the prince of the power of the air? Ephesians 2 says that. Let me ask you a question. Who do you think Satan wants? Who does he really want? I'm going to tell you who he wants. He wants me and you. He wants the church. That's what he wants. You know, I believe Satan thinks he can't get God off the throne. He's tried that already. But if he can hurt his kids, that's painful, right? You ever known of anybody that says, do whatever you want to me, leave my kids alone? And not a mama in here don't understand what I just said. Do whatever you want to me. Say whatever you leave my kids alone. I found your sensitive spot. Satan wants God's children. You think that's not true? Read Revelation 12. Here's the woman with the 12 stars, right? All of a sudden, her child is born. What's Satan doing? He's right there waiting for that child to be born. Immediately, that child is caught up to heaven. What's the picture of that? That means this son is in heaven. Immediately, what does the old dragon turn on? He turns on her seed. Who's the seed of this woman? That is the seed that comes through that son, the spiritual seed. He attacks the church. He wants the church. He wants us. In the Pentagon, is it important for the military to know who your enemy is? Is it important for the Pentagon to study the tactics of your enemy? Our oldest son now is teaching at Freed-Hardeman. But before he went to Freed-Hardeman to teach, he was in Huntsville, Alabama. He worked with a private defense contractor that studied enemy missile defense systems. That was his job. It was so top secret, he couldn't tell me anything of what he did in his job. It's classified. I said, "You're kidding me." And I got to talking with him. He said, "I can't tell you anything about it." And by the way, I was waiting on this line to come out of his mouth. "If I told you, I'd have to kill you." Y'all ever heard that? If I told you, I'd have to kill you because I couldn't let this leak out. Oh, he don't do that. We literally have people in the United States government, their entire job is to study the enemy. Did you know that? Well, if you don't, you do now. Let me ask you a question. How important for you to study your enemy? How important it is for you to know who your enemy is? I'm not talking about know who your friend is, because Christ is your friend. By the way, matter of fact, Abraham's called the friend of God, right? James 2. So I know who my friends is. I better know who my enemy is. I better know the tactics of my enemy. By the way, here's a tactic of your enemy. Take away from you what God gave you, you'll curse him to your face. Let me ask you a question. If God took your health away from you or allowed Satan to take your health away from you, would you still be here today? If you lost everything financially that you own, that God has blessed you, because every good and every perfect gift is going to, if literally you are broke, would you still be here today? Do you know there are people who are not even here today who were blessed last Sunday? Oh, you do know what last Sunday was, right? Come on, shake or nod. You do know what last Sunday was, right? Satan says, let me tell you about humanity. They only appear at services, at the best of them, 3 times a year. Christmas, Easter, and Mother's Day. Outside of that, they wouldn't darken the door of any building. Let me ask you a question. Is that true of certain people in humanity that you know? Is that true? Shake or nod. Now, if I know that and you know that, does Satan know that? And of that people, of that persuasion that only show up 3 times a year, because by the way, they don't need but 3 spiritual meals an entire year to survive, right? Of those people, you let their children die, you let their income wane, you let their health fail them. Tell me what Satan knows about that bunch. All of a sudden, I get a telephone call. Doctor just told me I've got 6 months to live. Why'd God do that to me? And I said, God didn't do that. Satan did that to you. All sin and suffering and all the consequence of sin, that didn't come from the hand of God. That came from Satan. You're blaming the wrong person. You're turning on the wrong person. You're rejecting the very one that you need the most. And you're letting this guy get off the hook. How many times have people let Satan get off the hook? Because they turn on God. God's not the problem, he's the solution. I've known people to suffer and immediately they just quit church. Quit coming to church. Let me tell you something. You've done the very opposite of what you need. You need the church now more than you've ever in your life. Come on, shake or nod. True or false? Look, we're not just studying history here. We're studying life. This man went through torment. By the way, and Satan let his wife live, right? There's not a gentleman in here that doesn't know the power and the influence of his own wife. Why would Satan do that? Well, let's go back to the Garden of Eden. Who did Satan use to get to Adam? Come on. Does he know, ladies? Why does that gentleman sit in that car and send his wife in there to talk to me? I see the tactic all the time. Don't you? God says, you can touch his things, you can't touch him. By the way, that shows the mad dog's on a leash. Y'all remember Flip Wilson? I'm telling my age now. It says the devil made me do it. It's like I couldn't control it. It's like there wasn't any way I could have gotten over that. No, the devil is still on the leash. God still's in control of the universe. And all of a sudden, he's stricken with boils from the top of his head to the top of his head, the soles of his feet. At 30 years old, I contracted chicken pox for the first time in my life. It literally was from the crown of my head down to my ankles. I had them down my throat, on my eyes, in my ears. Y'all ever heard the expression, eat up with it? I was eat up with chicken pox. I remember the church came, because I didn't go to services on that Sunday because I was recovering from it. I remember the church came up to me and he said, you look like Job. I said, I feel like Job. Okay? You ever been tormented, tortured? This is torture. Skin for skin. All will a man give for his life. You got to spare his life, but do what you will. Let me ask you a question. God had confidence in Job to deal with this battle he's battling with Satan? Does God have confidence in you? If God said, Satan, you can have him, you can have her. I know him. I know when it's all over, they're going to beat you. As a matter of fact, they're a good person now. I'm going to tell you what suffering's going to make out of this man. Suffering is going to make a great person out of a good person. The Apostle Paul said this about suffering. For our light affliction, which is but for a moment, works for us. Did you hear that? Our light affliction works for us. Not against us, for us. To what? To an eternal weight of glory. Listen, when your health is gone and you don't have anything left in this world, let me tell you something. You know what you long for? You long to go home. You ever been to a nursing home and sat down and talked with people? I had a lady who was in her 80s. Her birthday was coming up, and I said something to her about, you know, if you keep on, you're going to make it to 100. She said, I hope not. That's literally what she said, I hope not. I said, what are you talking about? She said, I don't want to live any longer in this place. I want to go home. Now, what she meant by home was not the 911 address of the house where she had to leave to come to that nursing home. She's talking about going to heaven. She's talking about leaving this world and going to the place where there ain't any pain and sorrow and getting old and aspirins and waking you up in the middle of the night to find out how your blood pressure is. Leave me alone, I'm sleeping. Go home. By the way, isn't that what suffering makes us want to do too? By the way, is that a good thing? Is that a bad thing? I'm not talking about checking out, at your own timetable. I'm talking about wanting to go home. Is that not a good thing? Paul said, I'm in a strait betwixt two, right? In Philippians 1. To be here with you is far better for you, but for me, to depart is far better for me. Now, well, where did he learn that? He learned it through the crucible of suffering. Suffering. All suffering's not bad, folks. It makes spiritual giants out of us. That's what I learned in the book of Job. He wasn't a bad man at the beginning. He was good. He's a great man. Why would Ezekiel mention him? Why would James mention him? Now, very quickly, I've got a look at that clock. I got 5 minutes. I want to talk to you about 3 friends that don't know what they're talking about. How many of y'all ever had anybody give you advice about personal matters that you're going through? By the way, they're not going through it, likely never have gone through it, but they've got all the answers. Is that true today in the 21st century in America and the educated society we've got? Let me tell you something. If you came in that door right there and you were sort of hobbling or something and somebody said, well, what's wrong with you? And then you said, they said, I got an aunt over here that had that same thing. She cocked up this thing in her kitchen and she took it for a week and she got better. You need to get this recipe. I'm said, ma'am, sir, leave me alone. You're not a medical doctor, and I understand what you're trying to do. Just leave me alone. I contracted something in Thailand. Brother Jim Dearman knows something about Thailand. I was so deathly sick, it took me 6 months for the doctors to even figure out what I've got. And even now, I don't know that they know what they're talking about. But I'm not even going to tell you what it is for fear that you'll walk up to me after class or service is over and tell me how to fix it, all right? But I have mentioned this to some folks, and all of a sudden they've given me every kind of home remedy known to man. I haven't tried any of them. I've done what my medical doctor told me to do, and so far, since 1995, I've survived it. But my doctor told me, you will live with this for the rest of your life. Y'all know what the new normal is? I had a new normal. Now, you can dwell on it. You can think about it, worry yourself to death about it. Not going to change anything. You just learn to adjust. Did you know life is a series of adjustments? How about getting old? Let me tell you something, young folks. Getting old ain't for sissies. That's an old cliche, but there's a lot of truth in that. Eliphaz, Bildad, and Zophar show up. Eliphaz's argument, I believe, is in chapter 4 in verse 8. In summary, even as I have seen, they that plow iniquity and sow wickedness reap the same. Eliphaz's argument is, as I have seen. His argument is personal experience. My experience has been, of all that I've observed in my life, and all of what I have observed that other people have told me about, this is the case. This is the general rule. By the way, it didn't apply to Job. Look, all the personal experiences you have ever had with anything in life do not necessarily equate the solution to a personal problem that an individual has. Don't think because you personally know this has worked in the past or this is true in the past, that's the case of what you're looking at. Look, the only sinless person to ever live a complete life on this planet, Eliphaz would have criticized. If you criticize Job, would you criticize a sinless person? As I have seen. Personal experience. Bildad, I believe, is Job 8 and verse 8. I'm running quickly. For inquire, I pray thee, of the former age, and prepare thyself to search of thy fathers. Bildad is an argument from history. Eliphaz is my own personal history. Bildad says, no, let's go back and study history all the way back as far as we can study history. By the way, is it important to study history? Absolutely. Is it important to learn from your personal experiences? Absolutely. By the way, the principle of sowing and reaping teaches that you learn from your personal history, personal experiences. But does history give all the answers? Well, inspired history does, but not uninspired. Okay, there is what's known as inductive and deductive reasoning in logic. One has to do with you take general things of a general nature and you apply it to specific cases. Others is, here's a specific case and you make a generalization that this is true of all things. So if you looked at Jesus on the cross, you would say, here's an individual suffering worse than anyone has ever suffered. The general principle is anybody that hangs on a cross is the most wicked person that's on the face of the planet. So all you got to do is count all the crosses, wicked, 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 wicked. Well, not him. He is the exception to the rule, correct? Matter of fact, he's basically the only exception to the rule. So you can't use that kind of logic and take a specific case and draw a general conclusion. That's their problem. By the way, you can't take your personal experiences of everything that you generally know and apply that to a specific case. Let me tell you something. Every one of your spiritual case is different. Even mine's is different. And I have to look at the facts of your life to be able to help you with the passages that are found in the Bible. Don't overgeneralize to people. So he's going to study history. By the way, Romans 15:4 basically says, whatsoever things were written aforetime were written for our learning. By the way, what was written aforetime? We're not talking about U.S. history or Western civil or whatever. We're talking about the Bible. That is inspired history. That information is applicable to our study, to our answers. Then you turn to Job chapter 20, and then I'll quit. Okay, as I say, I repent. I'm about a minute over. Job 20, here's Zophar's argument. Verse 2, therefore my thoughts cause me to answer? For this I make haste. My thoughts, what I think. So Eliphaz is personal experience, Bildad is the study of history, and Zophar is I think. Let me tell you something. You all got an I think. Well, Clark, I'm running into this situation. What do you think? What I think don't matter. Here's what the Bible says. How many of you ever know? Well, my preacher thinks this way, and this preacher thinks this way. What do you think? What I think don't matter. I learned that from Zophar. By the way, we all got opinions. Guaranteed, at this fellowship meal, you got an opinion about every dish there is. Guaranteed. Every restaurant you've ever in, you got an opinion. Whether it's good, bad, thumbs up, thumbs down. We all got opinions. By the way, keep your opinion to yourself when it comes to a person's personal problems. Just keep your opinion to yourself. You don't know all the facts, only God does. And that's what you learn in this book. What you can fix, do your best with the knowledge of the Bible. What you know you can't fix, let God handle it. Let God handle it. Save you a lot of grief and that person too. Thank you for your attention.